I mean, the Samuel Paty murder was a big moment for many reasons, and yeah, you did some great writing on that as well. And I suppose one of the things that worries me that I find underpins a lot of this is that I sort of accept that extremists will do extreme things. What really blindsided me when I first started poking my nose in this conversation was the number of interest groups that would make excuses for them or attack the victim. And we seem to see this time and time again, and this ties into freedom of expression. Whenever there's a cartoon controversy that inevitably leads to someone's death, and then rather than an outpouring of condemnation of the murder and a reiteration of the right to satirize and mock Islam's prophet, we see many Islamic interest groups and quote unquote Islamic scholars and theologians signing petitions against the French government, attacking France, essentially accusing France of being responsible for these things because of its sort of, draconian anti-Muslim laws and like laicite and things like that. And do we not have a massive problem here that extremism and jihadism aside, mainstream Islam in Europe is very conservative and not entirely conducive to the principle of free expression?
Well, it's not just the groups that you mentioned. I mean, even the kind of New York Times and the Washington Post columnists were taking that view, and even I think didn't Justin Trudeau make some pretty dodgy remarks in the aftermath as well. So I think just to stay with that for a second, I think there's a really increasingly distanced relationship to free expression on the kind of progressive left at the moment, and just really kind of there's really worrying, really, because it goes way beyond cartoons. It's the kind of the replacement of a kind of a cornerstone or a foundation of our societies, which is the right to free expression and freedom of belief and things like that, kind of being replaced with these ideas of like offense and hate, protection from offense and protection from hate, and like the elevation of minorities into like this kind of like super protected group that needs to and again it's really paternalistic and condescending, but I think that plays massively into this. So like it's all very well having those groups condemn it and stuff, but they're getting oxygen from way too many on the progressive left as well on this. And I mean, you have to look at, it's a different issue, but you only have to look at like the hate crime laws that are going through in Scotland right now to look at the way that hate and offence is kind of replacing like I said, foundational principles of how our society is run. So I think this is a huge point of contention that we're going to have to deal with sooner or later. Is like, what do we stand for? Do we stand for like protecting people from offence and hate, or do we stand for the right to free expression? On the point about interest groups and community representatives and leaders and things like that, I think there's a huge problem, and it's more pronounced with the cartoons issue than with any other issue. I think most thinking people condemn like the Manchester bombing or something like that as just an outright slaughter of children, but it does, when the cartoons comes into it, it definitely gets more complex, and again it does get some people are quite, in my view, kind of morally and intellectually confused about this question, because I think you alluded to this in your question, like nobody says you have to like these things, nobody says you have to like Charlie Hebdo or whatever it is, but if we can't unequivocally condemn a school teacher getting his head cut off in the street in broad daylight, then like, to be honest, the jihadist with the knife is the least of our problems. Like we've got serious problems there.
Seems like a very simple ethical conundrum, that one, doesn't it? Murder for cartoons. But it's it's surprising to me how many people get utterly exposed by very simple questions surrounding that topic. And I suppose, talking of very simple questions, do you think our mainstream media could do better to vet or challenge a lot of these interest groups who seem to be on a rotation like basis on our news media to opine on these things? Because many of these groups, when you dig away at their beliefs and their proclamations, they're out and out Islamists themselves. And it's really frustrating to me because I want to be able to point at secular liberal Muslims and say, listen to these guys, they're upholding liberal values such as, you know, freedom of expression, freedom to and from religion. And a lot of these groups are wheeled out under that guise as the sort of moderate voice. And then when you try and pin them down on issues such as stoning people for adultery or what's the correct punishment for homosexuals, they turn into either outright Islamists who just tell you what they think or become very wriggly and won't give you a straight answer. So, I mean, could our news media do more to challenge these people? And I suppose it's just a case of them not recognising it because they're not very familiar with Islamic faith the way they would be with the Christian faith, given we live in a sort of culturally Christian country.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't really know the answer because I think, you know, why shouldn't an Islamist group be able to say, you know, go in the papers or write an opinion piece, or, you know what, I'm not, like I said before, I'm not in favor of banning these people or taking their right to free speech or free expression away, but they do pose a unique challenge. I think the bigger unique challenge, and this is partly why some organizations I think were dissolved by the French government, was that they do pose as something else, and it makes it difficult for supporters as well, because a lot of people who support these groups will have no idea of like their kind of true nature, and or, you know, even people who work for them or volunteer for them won't really know kind of the bigger picture of what's going on. So they do pose a really unique challenge for liberal democracies, really. But the other thing is again, this isn't just exclusively a question about, you know, liberal secular Muslims versus you know, Islamists. Like there are plenty of conservative Muslims who are not Islamists, who are, you know, in a way secular themselves. So, and again, that comes back to what we spoke about right at the top, is like I think if we can see the political nature and treat this as a political phenomenon, I think we'd be a bit better placed to do like what you mentioned, to identify when there's a kind of political lobbying group, or when there's a real kind of political objective behind what's going on. But you know, it's immensely difficult because, as you know, not many people want to talk about this, and I understand why not many people want to talk about this. You know, the charge of racism or Islamophobia is extremely damaging and gets thrown around when people talk about this. So I don't blame people for not wanting to talk about it.
Yeah, I suppose what frustrates me, I mean, you have some sort of crackpot Christian who blames the weather on homosexuality, and it's, you know, you have journalists lining up to cover it in the UK, which is perfectly fine. But I often find out the truth about certain Muslim interest groups and figures from bloggers, or it's something I've uncovered myself, or it's something I've read in your work. And I don't think you're not typically you're not typically started out as a journalist for a newspaper. So I suppose that's what frustrates me a little bit, that people who have the platform and you trust to expose these kind of things just don't seem interested at all.
Yeah,
that's more of a moan than a question.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, to be honest. It's tough. I mean, like to their credit, like the groups do this well, and to be honest, there's like some people have done a lot of damage on this as well. Like some people who have, you know, like labeled every Muslim group in the West as like an extension of the Muslim Brotherhood or something ridiculous like that. Like there's like conspiracy theorists on the right, and like what were the people who cropped up like mainly out of the US, especially in the 2000s, like the counter-jihad movement and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, you know, they've done a lot of damage, I think, to the way we see this problem and like dealing with this as like serious adults rather than, you know, just like actually just being racist and throwing Molotov cocktails into the debate. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, there'll be a lot.
Don't have an answer. Just endorsing your moan.
Yeah, no worries. It's good to talk. I feel better getting it out there now.